Welcome to another edition of the Daily Night. I'm your host, Brian Smith, and this episode is a rather fun one. We have some recruiting news, a commitment, some other players that were on campus that I didn't know was going to be on campus, and quite frankly, it is a barrage of information about the UCF Knights and their recruiting efforts. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get the obvious out of the way as I put it up on Inside the Knights on Fan Nation, powered by Sports Illustrated. Isaiah Nixon has committed to the Knights. This is a big time get for the program that has went after him for a very long time, but still had to beat off teams like Georgia to get him. To that point, both of the DN commits for the Knights have offers from Georgia. That puts things in perspective on how recruiting has shifted. And the article I'm putting this in, talking about recruiting, and there'll be a few other tidbits. There's going to be a snippet of Coach Malzahn talking about recruiting and how things have kind of changed in the last year or so since he's arrived in Orlando. He's 100% correct. When I first started covering UCF, it was June 1st of last year. And I had some expectations, but if you would have told me in less than a year they were beating Georgia for anybody, I'd have been surprised. 2 kids out of their first 3 public commitments being defensive ends with offers from Georgia, I would have laughed at you. UCF recruiting is on the rise. Isaiah Nixon is a 6'4", 6'5" kid, and he plays at Lakewood High School. It's one of the famed programs over here in the area I live. I'm in Tampa. He's in St. Petersburg, and they've always got players. One of their kids last year signed with Alabama. So it places things in perspective. It's the big dog in Pinellas County in terms of just producing raw talent. There's no question about that. Now, what does that mean specifically about D-end? I might as well touch upon that while I'm thinking about it. Number one, you can now be choosy. Do you take another edge rusher? And that goes into a bunch of subpoints. If this was just a straight up, we are a 4-3 defense, it would be a little bit less complex. But no team really runs just one defense anymore because of the spread offense that you go against almost every single week. Thank you, Wisconsin, for being the exception and living in the Stone Age. But there's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration. You're going to run some 3-man line, some 4-man line. You're going to have some circumstances where you'll run what they call it in the old school way, a 50 defense, 3 men down, and 2, not 1, 2 defensive ends that are basically standing up / outside linebackers. Again, there's variations of even of that. So you need players that can play multiple spots. Isaiah can do that. And the other DN commit, Kaven Call out of Apopka on the edge of Orlando, he's a kid that can do it as well. He's played inside and on the edge for Apopka High School. Both of them can do both those things. So if they run a 4-man or a 3-man line, you could see either one of them with their hand in the dirt or in a 2-point stance on the edge. That is great flexibility. And that is what UCF needs. If you're going to compete and have really any chance of ever consistently, I don't care about this one season stuff, consistently being a playoff contender, you need guys in the trenches that are just flat out better than the guy in front of them. Part of that is versatility. If the other team has to prepare for more, it's a lot worse for that team. Offense is more complex than defense generically. Playbooks for offenses are huge. The last thing that an offensive line or an offensive coordinator or quarterback or whatever wants to hear, hey, guys, the next team we're playing is going to give us about 5 different looks from their base. UCF can kind of do that if they want already. And by years 3 and 4, you're getting down the line as you slowly expand and your players learn more and UCF's defensive line coaches and linebacker coaches work together, etc. That's what's going to happen. Isaiah Nixon, Kaven Call, they provide huge opportunities for the Knights to move guys around. And that also helps something else. When you have a player like Lee Hunter, and you're only going to get a guy like that every once in a while, put him at nose, you can run more 3-man line if you want. If Ricky Barber's banged up or whatever guy's hurt down the line after Ricky leaves after this next season, and you're a little bit short at D-tackle, you can run some different variations. Katie McDaniel's another one of those guys. He can play down. He can play up. Landon Woodson can play down. He can play up. You have the versatility to play a little more 3-man and then just use it more of a hybrid athletic guy on your edge in a 2-point stance. Huge pickup for the Knights. because now Nixon gives them that flexibility. If they want to, you know what? We want a pure power DN, what they call a 5 technique or a 4-eye. That guy is a player you can really go after, and you can kind of narrow your focus. And you can also add into that. You can take a guy that has to be somebody, he's not going to play up, but we want a power guy that can at least occasionally in a 4-3 scheme play inside at the 3 technique and be a true D tackle on 3rd and 7. He's a pretty good pass rusher. But on 1st and 10, we're going to play him in our 4-man line as a strong side end. So you have different ways of covering that. And UCF is getting more bang for their buck with one scholarship, essentially covering multiple positions at 2 different players. So with that, moving on, UCF D-line recruiting is going very well. I have a couple other notes in general that I want to give before I go into any specifics about players I saw just walking around, players that I knew were at the game, or things I read on Twitter, Instagram, etc. Number one, the level of talent overall that was on campus was really good, and I'm going to go into that. But they did something that was really unique, and a lot of schools, I think, fail at this. This is something I've complained about for schools I don't even follow, and it drives me bananas because it's so easy. A lot of programs don't do a good job of inviting the high school program. They'll have, let's say, 6 to 12 kids that are being recruited, but quite frankly, 8 of them conservatively aren't good enough to play at that program. I mean, not make the roster, but play. So they only recruit 1 kid. And in general, I understand that from a mathematical standpoint. Recruiting is about relationships. Travis Williams talks about that all the time when he comes before us in the media. Travis is right. The number of coaches that contact me on Twitter, call me, tweet to me, whatever, and all this stuff in private that are just, I can't even say what they say on a podcast, that are angry at School X and pick one around the country because they're bypassing their kids for others is limitless. So sometimes if you really don't want that kid, the only middle ground you have is at least bring the coaches in, bring in several of their other kids, make them options, make them feel comfortable with you. And at least you can sit down and tell the kid, this is what we think, tell the coach what you, doing things face-to-face is a big part of this business. Some schools have gotten really arrogant with that, and it's hurt them. Now it's getting a little better. Even Alabama's and Georgia's and Florida's and different programs you think of traditionally down south have done more of that. But it's still something that they don't always do. UCF had kids from Apopka and several other programs all around. Mosley High School up in the Panama City area. There's several kids coming. Will they offer all of them? Heck, they probably won't offer 25%, but they want to build relationships, and then you see them grow. They come to your camp. They come on another visit. Their senior film is much better than their junior year. Then you offer. That stuff happens. There are all kinds of kids like that. One of the best players in the country this last year did not have a single offer until September of his senior year. He changed positions. Sometimes you just don't know. That kid ended up signing with Miami, but he had like 25 offers and didn't have any going into his senior year. 0. Build relationships. Let the recruiting part take care of itself. But if you wait too long, then, oh, I like this kid. The number of times I get that phone call about screw that school is limitless. Don't be that school. UCF's smart, and they're doing that. Now, it's going to kind of go a little bit by position. The running back situation, the quarterback situation, they're pretty much tied up with who they're going after. I don't know if anybody on campus was a 23 kid, meaning the upcoming senior class, that was going to be offered by UCF. There might be somebody, but I'm unaware. So I'll leave that at that. Isaiah was here. He's a kid that I know well. He is at Wiregrass Ranch, pretty close to where I live in Tampa. He is a burner, class of 24. He's an elite talent. He kind of stepped onto the scene last year, and he runs by guys. I've seen him play several times for Team Tampa, the 7-on-7 organization here where I live, and he can play for anybody. He was on campus. That's very, very important. He came with one of his coaches. Again, build relationships. The other guys that were on campus, mostly Georgia and Florida, but as I've got a list over here on my extra screen, kind of going through it. The thing that I saw that was just the variety of athletic guys they had, length in particular. Receiver is just one of those positions where UCF never really struggles, but they had a lot of guys on campus that I could tell that if they wanted to, they could be a tight end or just from an athletic build, not even paying attention to the lanyard they had on or anything like that. I just happened to run into Isaiah and said hello to him, but that is a great sign. If they can get kids like that on campus consistently, and this state, ironically, doesn't struggle at receiver. There's at least 20 kids in this state in the class of 23 that could play at UCF. It's insane. You consistently put yourself in a good position. The length and everything else, some of the tight ends, and I'll get to one of those in a second, is so important. Aiden Mazzell was here. He's from Boone High School. Some of the other schools he's looking at are like Florida and Alabama, Georgia, etc. That kind of list, then you put UCF with, is the theme. It goes back to what I said about the kid that committed, Isaiah Nixon, as well as Caven Call. They are now competing with the big boys at receiver, D-line, etc. Also of note, tight end is something that I have beaten on for a very long time. UCF has to do better in getting some of these kids. One of the things that I've looked at for a very long time is how you use packages based on the tight end position. If you don't have a tight end that you trust, for lack of a better phrase, and that is a really important one, it limits what your quarterback can do, your running back, your other receivers, etc. They had Randy Pittman on campus again. Randy is, I've lost track of how many times he's been here. He's one of the kids from Mosley, and he's an H-back type. He's probably 6'2", and he is filled out. He looks totally different now than when I saw him at UCF's camp last summer. That is a big boy, and I know from just watching him from 10 feet away, he can really run, change direction, and he is a pure athlete that just loves football. I don't even know how you would use him because he's such a good athlete. Like, legitimately, third down and goal, you could put him at monster back or fullback or use him in a wildcat, and he could carry the ball. I'm guessing he's 225, 230. I don't know. He's in that range, but he's an athlete. I don't care. That's the kind of kid they're bringing in, and that's why I said some of these kids just look like receivers, Nixon being one of them. He played tight end / receiver at Under Armour. Well, this is another kid that can do that, and that this is his primary position. Nixon's going to play DN for the Knights. But this is the battle that you go after. He's been committed to Florida State, which is probably 40 minutes to 50 minutes from his house, but UCF keeps getting him back on campus, and I'm sure most people know Florida State better win this year. That staff is in deep, deep trouble. So there's going to be some turnover possibly with their staff, and that means probably turnover with the recruiting if things don't go well. Pittman is probably going to go to UCF or Florida State. That would be a huge addition to the roster. Up front, there were several big kids that were here. Sincere Edwards, who's ironically one of Caven Call's buddies. He's a class of 24 kid from Wekiva. I would be surprised in the end if he doesn't end up signing with the Knights. He's a kid that's probably going to be a powerful defensive end, can play some free tech maybe down the line. He's still got 2 years of high school left and then college to get bigger and stronger. That's a big-time player. Another kid that's going to have 25-plus offers. He's going to fall into that Florida, Georgia range in terms of recruiting. Those are the kinds of kids they're trying to get on campus over and over and over and over and over again. Also of note, this list, I really don't think people have gotten into the 24 list. And I cover recruiting at all levels. I know about some kids that are 25 and 26, freshmen and eighth graders, because some kids just develop early. To me, the best defensive player I've seen in the class of 24, regardless of position, is a Darius Hayes. And this is, I don't even know how many visits he's been on campus at UCF now. I know it's multiple. He is at least 6'4". He plays at Largo High School, again, kind of close to me. He's over in the Clearwater area. He has offers from everybody already, the Alabamas, Ohio States, Notre Dame's, Georgia, whatever. UCF's had him on campus multiple times. He will be a national top 10 kid conservatively in the class of 24. As I'm walking out of the press conference, he's getting gloves from Isaiah Bowser, and he thought it was great. He was hopping around. He was all excited about it. He's really into UCF. Imagine what UCF recruiting would be like in the class of 24. I mean, that's over a year away. If you could sign a guy that potentially ends up being number one in the country. He's a middle linebacker, 6'4", 210, 215, runs like a deer, and he's extremely physical. The only problem with him is, where exactly do you play him in college? He may outgrow middle linebacker. He's got 2 years of high school again. So you're looking at a position that he could be an outside guy. Maybe he's another edge. Maybe he moves around. But those are good problems to have. So keep that in mind. UCF is not only recruiting 23, but they're doing a very high level with 24 as well. Some of the other kids that came in, it's just amazing. I'm kind of looking at my list. How many of them showed up? I don't know. I didn't have a chance to see all the lanyards. I'm going to guess half these kids showed up, and then there were some others that didn't. But I've got a bunch of scrabbled down notes and everything. I think that based on just what I saw standing by the area where they go in, they got to sign in with their parents. There were 100 recruits there in some capacity. Maybe it was more, but here's the general theme. Central Florida kids, as you would expect, was really heavy. And it was a lot of the heavy hitter programs, Apopka. There were kids that were coming in from Lakewood. There were kids that were coming in from other schools in the city of Orlando, like Boone. If you continue to do that and build relationships, this list I'm looking at, and again, I can't confirm everybody because we'd be here all day, even if I could, it's going to pay dividends for you in classes 24, 25, 26, as you ascend your program and then get it to the elite level and keep it there. So, Bryce Harrison from Apopka, he's related to Shaquille O'Neal, by the way. Those kinds of things are what you're looking for. He's a developmental kid. He's gotten a lot bigger. He's trying to get up to 240. He's about 230 now. He plays tight end. Maybe he's a kid that develops during his senior year. UCF is banging that drum too, and they're doing a great job. A lot of Georgia kids were in town. I tell you what, if UCF can even come close to consistently doing in Georgia what they're doing now, years ahead, this is going to be a loaded roster. The state of Georgia, in my opinion, is about as good as it gets in terms of not only talent, but development. They, unlike Florida, unfortunately, they spend a ton more money on facilities and getting kids involved in youth. They let them practice more in the summer. As a matter of fact, they practice more than any other state in the country. June, early July, the Georgia kids they're doing different types of practice. It's almost like another spring ball, and they're going to come in and play early. Castellanos and some of the guys that UCF has gotten, Griffin, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Trust me, Georgia is going to be very helpful to UCF in this class. And hint, there's some more kids coming from that area. To wrap this up, one last note. When Gus was at the press conference, Jason Bede of the Orlando Sentinel asked him about, hey, I know you can't talk about names of guys from an NCAA standpoint. Coaches are not allowed to say kids' names, but what's it like? That point, again, is very important. I can't repeat it enough. They're just getting in on kids they didn't before. And some of them, they're doing a great job of blending because not everybody's going to be a 4 or 5-star kid like Isaiah Nixon or Caven Call. That's fine. You have to find kids that fit you, fit your program. And I think UCF's done about as good a job as any school down south in this cycle of finding a nice combination. There's still a few kids they don't know about. They keep recruiting them. There's a couple kids from Lakeland, et cetera. They may end up offering. It depends. So as they talk about these high up kids, they're still keeping some other guys that are on that cusp. And that's going to make the June camps really interesting, as well as the early season in, what is it now, 4 or 5 months, we'll get into football again. UCF may offer a kid that I haven't even discussed or written about on Inside the Nights. Not one time. That's okay. That's okay. You have to do your own homework. That's something, especially Travis Williams talks about. He watches the film. He said, I'm a football guy. I watch film. That's what they've done, and they've done a really good job. So I'm pretty happy with where UCF is, and it's far out exceeded what I expected. So real quick, going to have a few other things coming up on Inside the Nights on Fan Nation, powered by Sports Illustrated. You can check out the site. Just type in Inside the Nights. You'll find it pretty easy. And I tell you what, I'm going to do some Malzahn stuff. I'm going to talk about the receivers. And I'm even going to talk a little bit about Miami. One of my interns went to the Miami spring game and talk about them, talk about some of the other things. Probably do a podcast later this week with one of the other publishers from one of the other sites. Spring gives you a little bit of a glimpse. So kind of curious what other teams around the state are doing, maybe talk a little recruiting. So everybody have a great day. Thank you very much and take care.